A heart in the ashes. The air was still cool as dawn approached, and Ember liked it that way. She walked down the narrow gravel path from her house to the mailbox, her breath creating small puffs of mist in the early morning air. The world was quiet, untouched by the rising sun, and it was in these moments she found a brief reprieve from the noise of her mind. Her black hair, streaked with silver, fell loosely around her shoulders. Her deep blue eyes filled with an emotion that seemed both endless and hidden. She was an outsider in her town, invisible to most, and that's how she preferred it. 3 years had passed since the accident that took her best friend, Ash. They had been inseparable, Ash with his fiery red hair and amber eyes, and Ember with her calm, steady presence. Perhaps it was destiny that bonded them so deeply, their names echoing a connection to fire and flame, warmth and destruction. Even though they were opposites, Ash had always brought light to Ember's life, and she had fallen in love with him before she even realized what love truly meant. He had been her anchor in a world that often felt too heavy, too judgmental. In him she had found a safe haven where neither of them cared about the whispers or the stares from others who couldn't understand their bond. As she reached the park, Ember sat on the creaky old swing, a familiar spot where they used to meet. She closed her eyes, the sound of chains gently squeaking as she swayed back and forth, letting herself be pulled into a memory. Flashback. Hurry up, you're missing it. Ash's voice rang through the air, filled with playful excitement. He stood at the top of the hill, his hands cupped around his mouth to project his call. I'm coming, Ember shouted, laughing as she jogged up the hill to join him. When she reached him, Ash was sitting at the base of a large oak tree, the one they had claimed as their spot years ago. His amber eyes sparkled as he grinned up at her. You always make me wait, he teased. Only because you like it, she shot back, playfully shoving him before settling next to him. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sky as it changed from deep purple to soft hues of pink and gold. Hey Ash's voice had turned quieter, more serious. Do you think we'll still be here together years from now? I mean, after everything. His voice held an edge of vulnerability, something rare for him. Ember smiled softly, resting her head on his shoulder. Always. You and me, Ash. No matter what. In flashback. Now, sitting in the same spot, Ember chuckled sadly to herself. That conversation had taken place just days before the accident. Ash had been so full of life, so confident that their futures were intertwined. But fate had other plans. She stood up from the swing and continued her walk, the morning sun now beginning to crest over the horizon, casting long shadows across the quiet streets. It had been 3 years, but the pain was still as fresh as the day she lost him. Every day she visited his grave, but today marked the anniversary. She stopped by a small flower shop on the way, the bells above the door jingling as she stepped inside. Morning, Ember. The shopkeeper, Mrs. Finley, greeted her with a kind but knowing smile. Picking up something special today? Ember nodded, her eyes drifting to the shelves until she found what she was looking for. A single red and black rose, crafted from metal, its petals glinting in the soft light. It was the exact shade of Ash's hair, a symbol she had come to associate with him. I think this will do, Ember said quietly, her fingers brushing the cool metal as she brought the rose to the counter. Mrs. Finley nodded. Take it, dear. No charge. It's been a hard few years for you. Consider it a gift from an old friend. Ember gave a small smile. Thank you. She walked out of the shop and continued down the familiar path to the cemetery. The memories of her and Ash together, the laughter, the secret looks, the feeling of belonging, it all came rushing back in a wave of bittersweet recollection. She still remembered the last time they had been together, the day of the accident. Flashback. Come on, Em. One more time. Ash had said as they rode their bikes down the steep hill. He always lived for the thrill, the adrenaline. Ember had laughed, chasing after him, but something felt off that day. As they sped down the hill, Ember had called out to him, "Slow down, Ash. You're going too fast." But he didn't hear her. Or maybe he did, but he couldn't stop in time. All Ember remembered was the sound of screeching tires, the sickening crunch of metal, and Ash's bike lying in a twisted heap by the side of the road. She never saw him alive again after that. In flashback, when she reached his grave, Ember knelt down, placing the metal rose carefully beside the headstone. She brushed her fingers along the engraving, tracing his name, Ash Keegan. "I miss you," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I keep waiting for this to get easier, but it doesn't. I keep waiting for the day where I won't feel like I'm missing a part of myself." She sat there for a long while, watching the sky, talking to Ash the way she did every time she visited. She knew she'd never get a response, but it didn't matter. As she sat, the sun finally rose fully, casting a warm glow over the cemetery. Ember smiled softly, remembering something Ash used to say, "Even when the fire burns out, the warmth stays." And somehow, knowing that part of him would always be with her made the day just a little bit brighter.